All right, well, we're cutting into your time. We're at 2:30, so people should have come over.
Okay.
And I'm going to introduce you now, which is...
Thank you. Okay, you'll give me the clicker later.
No, you're not allowed to.
Okay.
No, okay, go ahead. It's okay. How do you say your name?
Ittai.
Ittai. Ittai from Wix.com is going to talk to us about make local development with Bazel. Great again. Thank you, Ittai.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so it's been a packed 2 days. Thank you for coming. Just to understand the crowd a bit, I want to start with a show of hands. So raise your hands if you're using Bazel day-to-day. It could be migration. It can be actually using it. Awesome. Keep them up. Keep them up. Now, keep it up if you like handling build files, looking up which files belong to which labels. Yeah, OK. The few that left them up, let's talk later. But for Hazelist and Wix, this was a really, really big pain. People were really confused about why they need to do that suddenly, because we went with fine-grained dependencies. One more question before we dive in. So how many people are using Intellij with Bazel? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. OK, a bit less. Keep them up for just 1 second. Now, keep it up if your experience is fluent. Like, refactoring works, and you don't need to think. Yeah. This was our experience as well. So we'll touch on that. So I have to say that over the past year, I've had a lot of talk with developers, like Or from my team mentioned yesterday. And they came up to us and told us, hey, you gave us an awesome CI, but you seriously hurt us locally. Like, how is this possible? What's going on? And for us, this was the focus for a lot of internal work to level up the local dev experience. Now, some people even said to us, hey, maybe Bazel was a mistake. And I have to say that we think quite the contrary. Like, we think that Bazel has so much value on CI and local build times that it's giving value right now. But what I want to talk here is all of the work we've done, are doing, and are going to do to make local development with Bazel great again, in hopes that we can all join forces and do it together as a community. So, hi, my name is Ittai. I'm a backend guild manager at Wix. We have around 300 backend devs. For the past 3.5 years, I've been dreaming, architecting, coding, and supporting Wix's next generation CI, going from TeamCity and Maven to GCB, RBE, Result Store, and Bazel, the whole pack. Basically owning the project from 1 person, me, to 20 people, a whole group, and so on and so on. I've been a Bazel user and contributor since 0.2.3. That's 67 releases ago in 3.5 years. Scala maintainer, Bazel integration testing maintainer, and wrote big parts of Exodus, an automatic migrator. And over the past year, I've done a lot of work for local dev tooling. The reason I mention this is because I'm going to do some harsh criticism, and I want to mention that I'm part of this community. I love this community. It's just for us to improve. So Wix, we have around 1,000 developers, around 1,300 microservices, around 350 deployments a day. We come from a main repo layout, as if you saw Or's talk yesterday. We are moving from Maven to Bazel. We moved. Finally moved. Mainly in Scala in the backend. We have some Node, but that's out of scope for this discussion. And we predominantly work with Intellij. The reason I mention this is because if you have a monorepo layout, let's say, I don't know, Google 3, and you just have Java or C++, and like people are willing to work with other IDEs, then I think the tones of this discussion will be different. I think many of the core problems are very, very much the same, but you will find differences. So, like I said, the focus of this talk is JVM and Intellij, because this is our bread and butter. For context, we maintain a fork of the Bazel Intellij plugin for various reasons. It's open source. You can go and look at our commits. We try to have very few commits. And we have our own closed source plugin, Intellij plugin. I'll touch on that in a second. More importantly, I feel that this talk applies in general to static languages, because when you have the code analysis, you can extract a lot of tools and help your developers with all of these concerns. And of course, this isn't only relevant to Intellij, Eclipse, VS Code. We chose Intellij because that's where developers live. Out of 300, I would guess around 290 use Intellij. So that was a no-brainer. OK, so in the beginning, I made two bold claims. One is that the current situation is bad. So let's literally coded in the red. I will go here because I can see the slides. So moving files around takes hours, so we really try to avoid it. And oh my God, I just spent a third of my time on this feature adding dependencies. And I also said that we can greatly improve on it. Kudos on autosync. Things are much snappier now. These are real live Slack quotes from people, either DMs or in our support channels. I love DevFixer, and I'm in love. Finally, I can code without worrying about build files. So I will show, of course, both the pains and the tools that people loved. Yes, thank you very much. So let's get down to demo time. So let's start with, let me go into presentation mode. And let's talk about syncs. OK, so before I explain, what is a Bazel Intellij sync? So basically, it's the process where the Bazel Intellij plugin runs Bazel, reads all kinds of metadata out of it, and configures Intellij. What does it configure? Many things. One example is the external libraries that you might need, like JUnit, Hamcrest, and so on. And other source routes, like, for example, where you add source files. So this is really, really a small and short example. If you want to know more about syncs, please read Jin's blog post about it. It's awesome. So what's the problem about syncs? First is when you run a sync, then you have Bazel build, and you have IntelliJ indexing. This means that you're not coding. Your developers are waiting for the Bazel gods to finish, and they can't bring value. So now, maybe this isn't a problem, right? Maybe this doesn't happen a lot. So let's take a look at when we need to run syncs and see that actually it's very frequent, too frequent. So first, when you want to add a new dependency that's unused. So SLF4J, I want to use SLF4J because someone told me, hey, you have to use SLF4J in a demo. So I'm like, OK, but this isn't resolved, right? Intellij doesn't know about it. So you might tell me, hey, you need to add it in the build file. But that doesn't help anything, right, as we can see. So what do we need to do? We actually need to run sync. In the sync, like I told you, it will run Bazel. It will find out, oh, it actually has this SLF4J, and it will configure it right here. Thank you, IntelliJ. IntelliJ is, yes, it's asynchronous, so things, sometimes we'll need to run sync twice. Oh, but you see, and it was added here, and we see it's added here. So whenever you need to add external dependency that isn't already known in IntelliJ scope, you need to run sync. One. Number two, let's try to add a test. So I need to add foo test. And I'm like here, add test, public void test foo. And I want to run it. But no, I don't want a breakpoint. But I can't run it. Why? Because I need to sync so that IntelliJ Bazel will know that this is actually a test, and so on and so on and so on. So OK, so this is one case of adding tests. What about renaming tests? So my colleague, she gave me a code review, and she told me, hey, this isn't some test. This is some other test. I'm like, OK, you're right, you're right. But now I want to go and run it, but I can't, because renaming also requires syncs. OK, so adding external dependencies and adding tests and renaming files requires sync. Now, there are also other kinds of flows where you want to run sync. This, unfortunately, is not an exhaustive list, but these are just like the main kickers. So what did we do about that? Can we improve? So I want to show you a feature called autosync. So you see here, enable automatic sync for newly added files. It's experimental. So first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to Brendan, IntelliJ Bazel tech lead, team lead, because we're taking work he did, and we're building on top of that. He did for build.bazel. We actually changed it to work for Java and Scala, because that's what we care. And let's take a look at what it does, and then I'll explain maybe how it does it. So let's take a look at bar test. And I want to add public void test bar. And let's run it. And it's running without syncing and without me needing to wait. Let's see, it actually passes. Yes, it passed. OK, magical. How? Because once we added a file, we triggered sync in the background. Now let's try to rename it and see if this also works. Let's, like my colleague, the one with the code from before, so she also told me this is Baz, this is actually Baz, and you see that actually if you're keen, you see that it's actually running sync here in the background, and I need to entertain you, and now it's synced. So renaming also works. So, so I didn't show, by the way, about external dependencies. I will show that in just like a few minutes in the next thing. But adding tests, renaming tests, and this is, of course, applicable to all files, but tests is like where it lives the most. Another problem with sync is that it takes too long. Now, this is a toy example, and so this things like feel snappy. But this is a real problem. Now, we have already improved on that because I will exit presentation mode just for 1 second so you see it. Most often when you work, then people just click this button, right? And this button is, this is the Bazel, this is the sync button. The sync button, what it does is run incremental sync. Incremental sync runs all of the code that you're currently working on. It might be broken, it might be like thrashing and so on, and run sync on that. What we're running with autosync is partial sync, which is only for the specific target. So it's much more fine-grained. So this is one thing. We also trigger it automatically, like you just saw, so developer doesn't need to think about it. So really improved. But this isn't good enough for us, because people sometimes still need to wait a few seconds. If like it's larger targets, it can be like even 10 seconds. So what we're thinking of doing is using in-memory syncs. Basically, a lot of times you can find heuristics where this test is exactly like the other test, so you can just add it to in-memory. And for more heuristics, then what we're considering on doing is offloading to remote servers. So basically, if remote servers, I'll switch on for the next demo. If remote servers will do all of the heavy lifting, then developer machines won't need to wait that long. And if you do it preemptively and so on. But so both of these are a bit hard to do without collaboration from the Bazel and Intellij team. And like we talked in Birds of a Feather, the capacity is limited, so we need to see what we're going to do about it. Let's talk about adding dependencies. So when you write code, right, you need to use, like, unless anyone here is like in a God file, then I'm guessing you have imports that you add, and if you're using Bazel, then it's probably fine-grained. So when you add a dependency, you often need to add dependency in the build file. So what do you do then, right? So let's take a look at an example. Like my colleague, he told me, hey, use this new trivial utility. Oh, yeah, wait, I will do it right after sync refreshes. Yes, OK. Now we're good. And I'm like, OK, I will add it. And when it compiles, it looks good, right? And I'll just run the test, see that we're good. Oh, but it didn't actually compile even. I'm like, here, what's here? The package doesn't exist. And like, oh, OK, in the Bazel training, someone told me that, that there is like a simple solution for that, right? Whenever this happens, you just take the package. We're like Google. So just do //Java, or //BazelCon in our case, and just replace the dots with the slashes, and you should be good. Like, what's the problem? This isn't like a real problem. Adding dependencies is a breeze. Let's run the test and see if this actually solves the problem. Awesome! It solves the problem. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe adding dependencies isn't a big deal. So actually, first of all, I don't think this is good enough, but we came from Maven. So, and you might be coming from Gradle or SBT or whatever, so your layout might not be like Google. So I'm trying to add this module layout, and it fails like again. And just for kicks and giggles, let's try to use the naive approach. And we'll do this, and //BazelCon, and and yeah. And selection, again. Dot. I probably should have a shortcut keyboard shortcut for in selection. And let's run it. And this actually fails for a different reason, no such package. So we don't have a build file there. OK, so that approach doesn't work. What do you do in this case? Usually go to GitHub or code search or something like try to find module layout.java and then see what target this belongs to, right? So last night, I implemented a code search just for this demo. It's called Tree. I hope you like it. Yeah. And I'm searching, interesting, and oh, okay, I found it. Awesome. So what do I do now? I'll copy it. Yeah, this is what real developers do. And yeah, one sec. So we're here, and let's try. Yeah, it will happen. Don't worry. Up. Yeah. I'm actually thinking of joining the circus later. Up. No. The last one failed me. Okay. Okay, and let's run this. What do you think? Awesome. Also passed. Good. But you might tell me, okay, but this is your problem because you're not willing to really commit to Bazel and change all of your code layout. So we did this. And okay, but what if you have code that's part of a cycle? Oh, no, part is not what I wanted. Part of a cycle. And what if you have code that just belongs to a fine-grained target? Now, what does this mean? Let's take a look in the code search, but we'll just note that fine-grain A belongs to fine-grain, and part of cycle belongs to cycle A. So we're going again here, and we can actually see that part of cycle is in package A, but the build file is on top. Okay, it's not there. In fine-grain, we have a build Bazel with 2 files. So let's cut this. Let's cut fine-grain, and you see we have 2 targets. So what does this mean? This means we can't use the naive approach of just using the package name. And sometimes you want to have fine-grained targets. And if you have a cycle, this means you see this globs A and then globs B. So you can't use a naive approach, even if you have a Google-like layout. OK, so I've shown you the problems. What can we do about that? So what we did is we built a tool called Dependency. And granted, but some companies have done this, Google for sure. My inspiration came from Twitter, so thank you. From BazelCon, actually, talk at lunch with Twitter guys about pants. And what Dependency does, we'll let it fixed. You see it's running. It will trigger sync in a sec. And then we'll take a look at the build file. And then I'll show you a small flow diagram, really simplistic one. So you see it's done, and it's syncing, and everything works. And you can see, ta-da, all of the dependencies right in place. So it did it for us, right? So how does the fixer work? Really, really simplistically. Let's take a look. So it basically runs Bazel. If it passed, yay, we're done. If it doesn't, it scrapes the compiler output for FQNs, fully qualified names. Looks up in various indexes, a global one that we have, and I might touch on it and I might not, called label dex, and local indexes, finds the labels, and adds it to the build file. It runs Bazel again. Did I complete? If so, yes. Let's just be done. If not, I try again. It has all kinds of heuristics, both for scraping and for priorities and for indexes. We have a lot of edge cases that we handle. And Dependency, by the way, is a CLI tool, but we just integrated into Intellij so that you can write from every file and every directory. So run Dependency also from here. So this is good, right? This isn't bad, at least. But you saw it's not that quick. And also, I cheated. I warmed it up indexes-wise before. I know it's a small package, and so on, so on. So is this similar to what you want? I say no. I have a lot of bad things to say about Maven. But at least this was much, much better. So I want a seamless experience. Let's see if we can do this. So let's turn on another feature. It's going to be the default, a few weeks inside of Wix, called AutoDep. And AutoDep automatically adds dependencies in the background. Now, for someone who asked me about build file generation, this is somewhat related. Let's take a look first about the build file, just so you see I'm not cheating. No dependencies, right? Only JUnit. So now, this doesn't compile right now. And let's add part of cycle. And let's add fine grain. And let's add trivial. And let's add module layout. And let's run this test. Oh, I don't think I actually run the correct test. So let's finish it. This is the previous one. Wait. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's run this test. And you see, I didn't run Dependency, and it's passed. How can that be? Let's take a look at the build file here. And we see that while I was coding, while I was typing, the dependencies were added. So basically, this AutoDep uses like an Intellij listener where it gets a hook that an import was added, and then it uses logic very similar to DepFixer to take the fully qualified name, look up in indexes, and add to the dependency. But this has the great advantage of not needing to wait. OK, so we saw, we automated it, and then we made it much more seamless. But if you were like really keen that maybe you noticed that I cheated a bit, because up until now I only showed you code that resolved in Intellij, but didn't exist in the build files, right? So now what happens if your colleague sends you, hey, this handy utility, you have to use it. And you're like, adding it, and then what happens here? What do I do from here? Oh, I go to GitHub again? So no, you use Smart Autocomplete. A Smart Autocomplete, boom, just adds a dependency, runs the sync, and in like a second or two, we will be able to just use it. You see, fixed the build file. It added here, I'm sorry for the mess, but you see here it added handy util. And let's see, yes. So there are, unfortunately, still flakes with respect to this. Oh, yes. So when developer works and they're not trying to demo, then they're willing to wait the extra second for libutil. But you see we have libutil, and we can Alt-Enter. Ta-da. So this is also for Smart Autocomplete. So this, like DepFixer and like AutoDep, uses a global indexing server to get all of Wix's code basically at the tips of the developer. Okay? Now I just want to show you one more example before we continue. So what happens if you try to use something? Handy util was just one case in all of Wix's code. What happens if there are more examples? So you get this autocomplete pop-up, and you can say, oh, I want this, no, I want that one, oh, OK, this one, and then you get back the add label that we just saw, and so on and so on. We also have like a token-based search, and so on. So this is a bit about, we saw syncs, and we just saw adding dependencies. And, now, let's talk a bit about refactoring, OK? Everyone's favorite thing. No. But yeah. So actually, like for us at Wix, we used to do a lot of refactoring. We tried to keep our code clean. Moving to Bazel made it harder, much harder, because fine-grained targets suddenly mean that whenever you move stuff around, you need to think about the build files as well, right? It's not that trivial. Now let's take a look at one example. So should move. Thank you, Bazel sync. Thank you. Yeah, OK. I'm just impatient. So should move uses Yoda time. We see that. Should remain uses should move. Now my colleague, again, with the code review, she comes to me and tells me, hey, should move actually is part of the domain of one package. And like, you're right, I didn't think about that. And I'm moving it. And you see this updated, like correctly IntelliJ-wise, right? You see refactoring one should move. And here the package was updated. Like everything is good, right? We can push it. Like let's push the diff. Let's try to see what Bazel thinks about this, and partially sync. And yeah, not happy. Because should remain doesn't know anything about one, okay, the build file, and should move doesn't know anything about Yoda time. So let's take a look at this. The build file here is empty, and the build file here only knows about Yoda time. So what can you do about this? This isn't something that we just have a few POCs that we've done, but basically integrating DepFixer and or AutoDep into IntelliJ refactoring. They have hooks for this, and you run it on the target, and then we'll run it on the source. While it's running, I will just see, it will just work. But this is, of course, a toy example. There are a lot of caveats. What happens if 1 and 2 create a cycle together? What happens if there are other targets that need should move? Should they also have a dependency on 1? Should 2 export 1? Like, there are a lot of product questions here that we're going to iterate with our users in the near future. But in the interest of time, we'll skip this, because I think you got the gist. Basically, this is as Yoda time, and when I'll run it on 2, it will add should move locally. So this is how we can do refactoring in the small. I want to jump to the last example. I will also skip the red code. Up, yeah. Yeah. And I might have a bit more time, but just for us to be sure. let's not. Okay. Okay, good. So we took a look at sinks, right? We took a look at adding dependencies and about refactoring. What else do? You add targets, right? Because you want to have a new package. So what is the problem? The main problem is that sometimes the build file has machinery, like, oh, I need to do glob because that's the convention that we do, or maybe you have test only equals 1 because you need to do a test utility. This isn't something that most developers want to think about. And so we did the new Wix Bazel package, which uses semantic templates. So we have here a Scala testing util, and let's just create this new package, and you see it created a build file with all of the mechanics. So you don't have to think about that. So this is one example. Another example is, let's say you coded this, and maybe you extracted this. Like I work in TDD, so I extracted this from an existing file, and this doesn't have tests, and I want to cover a few tests. So what I do Command-Shift-T, create new test, and this works for Scala because layer respects 2, because that's what we do. And I'm doing like OK. And I have this. This up until now, it's just IntelliJ. But maybe you notice there's a build file here. And maybe you notice there's actually sync running here. And it says syncing. And in just a second, I'll be able to run this test without needing to think about it. So I can create a new test package and iterate. OK? So it's about finding the flows developers have and meeting it with tools, OK? So I will not be showing, I think I'm, I will show just the diagram, I think. So basically, let's do this, and up. Oh, wait, OK. Yeah, I should have done something different, but it's OK. Red code, yeah. OK, so I don't know how many of you have noticed this. If you're a Scala user, you definitely saw this, where suddenly your code becomes red and like, oh my God, what happened? I need to spend 2 hours like appeasing Intellij and Bazel. We solved this in like a workaround, and we have thoughts about how to solve it like more generically. If you're interested, come talk to us later. The general thing you can take away, and you should take away, is that trivial things might not work for developer experience. So this was one for us. A second thing, that's sources, just viewing sources of external dependencies didn't work. Many use cases. Okay, we needed to spend many hours debugging this and adding support in our plugin just so you get sources. This is like sounds basic. What are we? 2010? Just getting sources in. This didn't work. And it wasted a lot of time for Wix developers. So take into account, if you're on Groovy or Kotlin or whatever, things which are trivial might not work. Can we go back to the slides? Awesome. So let's talk about build file hygiene. And this might sound like a huge context switch, like what? We're talking about code and developer experience. What do you want with build file hygiene? So I'll get to that in a sec, but let's talk about what build file hygiene is. Build file hygiene is we want to keep build files maintainable, clean, up to date, and reasonably clear. Why? So mainly because when this happens, when the garbage piles up, the build becomes slow. It becomes slow because you have a lot of cache misses, because you have a lot of dependencies that you don't actually need, but they still give you cache misses. It becomes slow because you're less parallel, because your place in the graph is now much lower and not broader. And velocity also drops because if you don't explicitly declare dependencies, aka strict deps, then people have a hard time refactoring. If someone drops a dependency, suddenly downstream can be broken because they dependent on them bringing it. I can tell you how many times in Maven that we had storms in CI because people said, hey, framework, why did you drop SLF4J from this module? I was counting on to bring it. And no, this isn't part of API. This doesn't relate to us at all. You were just counting on us. So when build file hygiene goes to the dump, you get slow. Now, how does this relate to local dev? It relates to local dev because when you're proactive about it and you want to stop garbage being piled up, then you're hurting velocity, right? Because the developer, she's coding, and you're blocking, right? You're failing the build with strict dep, unused dep, and so on and so on. And she's like, what the hell? Like, this, I'm coding. I'm trying to get my business feature out, and you're not talking to me about build files. This isn't the same cognitive state. So what can we do about that? So let's talk about unused deps and strict deps. This is pretty common Bazel concept, right? Like informal Bazel concept. So unused deps is about removing dependencies you don't use compile time, and strict deps is about explicitly declaring all dependencies that you use. Mainly, a lot of rules. A lot of rules just have failures, warn modes. This hurts fluency, causes manual labor because I need to go to the log, copy the bulldozer at dep, like monkey work, and maybe I do it like automatically in iBazel. And this isn't like super fluent. Most people, for us, a lot of time people used to go to the log, search for it, and so on and so on. This was a bad experience. Our answers for strict deps is mainly autodep. If people use autodep while they're coding, you just get the dependencies that they need, right? So a strict deps error is very, very unlikely. For unused deps, I have to say that this is a harder problem because this has to relate to all of the files of a target, and you have to find out that all of the files don't need a specific dependency to say that it's unused. It's unclear that we can actually do this on the fly, while someone is coding, but for sure, what we can do is we can do it on demand. So this is what we're going to implement like in the next few weeks. Just on demand, before you push or before you're on test, you can say, show me like remove unused deps, and it will just remove that. So this isn't fluent, but this is workable at least. We're thinking about how to make it fluent. What I mentioned is using intelligent mechanisms. The advantage here is that even if your rule sets don't emit custom error messages like bulldozer, then you can use this mechanism. At least for us in Scala, we do emit them, but Wix doesn't use these because they have too many false positives and false negatives. And so we just opted out of that. And so the Intellij mechanism works really well for us. Even if you do use the error messages, then just consider having the plugin grep through the log instead of the user, and apply that as a squiggly, or just let people automatically apply it for them. Right? No need for the developer to actually do it. To go through the log. So excellent. I have a few more minutes, so I'll touch on exports and visibility just shortly. So these are other power features, right? You want to have exports because sometimes you want to have a target. Let's say you have a library. Let's say you have, I don't know, like a Kafka client, and maybe Kafka client is actually 10 targets, which are fine-grained. You want to have an abstraction. So maybe you have a Kafka client target that exports all of the other ones. If you want to help people, and actually tell them, hey, OK, you should export this and you should export that because this is part of your API, then you want some kind of mechanism to hint that to the developer. Similar to visibility, we migrated everything as public. I know that was a mistake. I was also in Benjamin Peterson's talk last year, but this was unfortunately long after we migrated. And we have everything as public, and we need to ease managing this because we want to get things to be less visible. So basically, think about when you're coding in Java and Intellij tells you this method can be lower visibility. Like it doesn't have to be public, it doesn't have to be protected. Similar mechanisms. Basically, we're thinking both of having ID inspections and CI bots that will cap on post build to give you like PR comments and so on and so on. So in the beginning, I made two bold claims, right? The current situation is bad enough. And I hope that you were convinced that the amount of syncs, the time it takes to run syncs, dependency management, refactoring support that's missing, adding targets, red code that I just showed in a GIF, and hygiene are not good enough, right? The current situation is bad. And I hope that I was able to convince you a bit that we can greatly improve on it. So auto-sync, future things that we want to do in memory, dep fixer, autodep, autocomplete, utilizing both of them for refactoring, smart templates and test generation for adding targets, jar cache, and IntelliJ inspection and CI validations for build file hygiene. Most importantly, we're looking for open source partners. Wix wants to open source most of this stuff during 2020. DevFixer, AutoDep, LabelDex, which is the global indexing server that I mentioned beforehand. If I'll have time, maybe I'll explain how it works later on after the Q&A. So we're looking to open source all of this stuff. And if you have these problems and you have capacity and you want to iterate with us, please come, reach out, and let's start the discussion. Even if you don't have the capacity, right? You don't have the manpower, but you have the problems, we're happy to come and consult and talk to you because, like I said, we love this community. We want Bazel to be like awesome and prosper, and we feel this has a lot of benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ittai. I already see folks lining up. Let's see if we've got anybody else for questions. Want to go ahead up top?
Hey, thanks for the talk. It was fantastic. My name is Danny. I work on Pants at Twitter. So I really appreciated the shout out. I wanted to say this is something, well, one, the UX for this and this delivery is something we didn't even kind of approach. I think it's fantastic, and it's something that we can really easily learn from. So thanks a lot for displaying it like this. Also, we're currently looking to potentially get around the sync problem of an IDE versus the build tool by having, again, we haven't implemented this yet, Pants actually infer dependencies so that build files can be mostly empty. Again, it's an idea at this point, but it's another possible way to get around that. Thanks again for this fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Is this a separate plugin from the official validate?
Yes. So the question was, is this a separate plugin from the official one? So we have two plugins. We have a fork of the official one, which we maintain. It's just like 6-7 commits on top of that. But for things that upstream currently don't want to accept, it's open source under Wix Playground, so you can take a look. And we have our own plugin that's closed source, and we are planning to open source big parts of that. Not everything, because some things are like Wix generators, which you don't care about. But this is part of the plan.
Hi, I'm Krishna from VMware. I think this is the day 2 issue everyone will run into, potentially. And we are in that stage. So you talked a lot about dependencies, right? There are a lot of times runtime kind of dependencies, like Maven has a lot of scope. Were you able to solve those? Or what are you looking at?
Yeah, so to be honest, we don't have a lot of runtime dependencies. We mainly use compile-time dependencies. We prefer things to be more explicit and less Spring, magic class path scanning. Having said that, we did think about extending DevFixer to scrape test logs to find class not found, errors in the test. But then you get into questions of, okay, which of the target graph does this class actually belong to runtime? So it's not an easy thing to match, and we decided not to go down that path.
Okay, so basically Spring kind of stuff is still not in.
Yeah. Also, by the way, it's many people use Spring with Java configurations and explicit, like Spring component scanning, XMLs, and discovery. This isn't supported. Yeah.
And the other question I have is the build files. Did you try to move it to lower levels? Currently, what we are trying to do is simulate similar to Maven at the package level, because it's very hard to manage in the IDE.
So we started the other way. We said 1-1-1, fine grain, like 10 times more. Like for every Maven module, we have around 10 or maybe 15 packages, okay, in Bazel. And then we said, let's build a tooling. And these are all of our toolings made to ease people from, I don't care if I actually have 1 build file or 10 build files, because the tooling will help me 90% of the way. So this is the idea.
Other question is, did the tooling help even if you had macros?
Yes, because they use Bulldozer.
The current Bulldozer doesn't help very much with macros, I think.
No, it does. Okay, let's take it offline. There are intricacies there.
Hi, Brandon from IMC. Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking forward to looking at what the open source code is now, and then whenever the code drop finally hits, because I also maintain an internal fork of the Intellij plugin, although my changes are primarily focused around CLion.
Mm-hmm.
So two questions. What has the memory, sort of the memory impact of all the additional indexing that you're doing been on like a dev laptop or a dev workstation?
So we have two indexes right now. We have a global one. It's that just, just a HTTP call, so it has no memory performance. And we have another one, which unfortunately is Refactor uses like a Git-based disk file index. And so this has a perf hit when you run Refactor, but it doesn't have a memory impact. We're looking to run Refactor in daemon mode, and then we'll probably have memory problems, but we'll handle them.
Okay, the second question is for the sort of additional tooling. Has this only been written with, or do you think this would be adaptable to other languages like Python or C++? Was it written in such a way to be extensible, or are these like specific to JVM?
I think that, so I think the devil is in the details, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that C++ and Python, I think, differ enough from JVM to maybe not work. C++ might be. I think it really depends on the details. So I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
We have time for one more question if you want.
Hi, or from Wix. Can you elaborate on the global index?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, like some people mentioned, we have basically, we have a BS service that we use. BS service is something like Bazel specific, that basically, after a build finishes, we get an event via Kafka, and then we go to the BS service and ask, okay, in this Bazel event, Bazel build, what targets did you have? And for each target, what outputs did you have? And then we download all of these. We basically just extract the jar, and using like BCL and whatever, we index all of that into Elasticsearch. So you get an index of fully qualified names to labels, and it's also token-based. And that way, you can just traverse the world.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. A big round of applause for Ittai. Thank you. It was a great talk.
Okay.
Yeah, you can take off, and we're going to take just 2 seconds here and switch out some things.